Hello, and welcome to Washington Courts Report, the official podcast of the Administrative Office of the Courts, covering some of the most important news, developments, and programs from the Washington State court systems. I'm your host, Patric Haerle, and the topic for today's episode is Judicial Well-Being. In March this year, the United Nations declared July 25th as the International Day for Judicial Well-Being. The resolution to the General Assembly was co-sponsored by more than 70 countries, and ultimately 160 member states voted in favor of it. This marks the first time that the United Nations has formally recognized judicial well-being as a matter of global significance through the proclamation of an International Day. You'll be able to find a link to more information and a background on the UN proclamation in the links below the episode on our podcast page and in the description on YouTube. This was an important milestone, as judicial well-being is now being acknowledged as a serious problem that needs to be addressed in courts around the world. The 2019 National Judicial Stress and Resiliency Survey, conducted in the United States among 1,034 judges, paints a sobering picture. The study identified that nearly 80% of judges experience stress from the gravity of their decisions, followed closely by heavy caseloads, unprepared attorneys, and self-represented litigants, all of which highlight the systemic pressures inherent in judicial work. Evidence-based research also consistently shows that the isolation inherent in the judicial role is a universal factor that undermines judicial well-being. This isolation can significantly affect mental health, increasing the risk of anxiety and depression, which in turn can impair judicial performance and decision-making. In Washington, the Judicial Assistance Services Program, or JASP, is meant to help judges manage these stressors and improve their well-being. A joint committee of the District and Municipal Court Judges Association and the Superior Court Judges Association. The purpose of the Judicial Assistance Service Program is to prevent or alleviate problems before they jeopardize a judicial officer's career. The program provides open-minded, confidential support for judges struggling with stress, mental health issues, addiction, medical illnesses, or the loss of a loved one, or any other issue that impacts their work. And now, to discuss the Judicial Assistance Services Program and judicial well-being in general, I'm happy to welcome Spokane Municipal Court Judge and Chair of the program, Judge Mary Logan, on our show. Thank you for coming on the show, Judge Logan.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Of course. So, I just want to get started finding out a little bit more about JASP, this great program that's doing so much for judges' well-being. Could you tell us a little bit about the program and the service it provides to judicial officers?
Absolutely. This is a program started, I think it was roughly back in 2004. It was probably discussed before they actually stood it up. But it was to have a joint association committee that could help judges who are sometimes in need of confidential help based upon a number of the things that you just listed here, including all of them, actually, isolation, the gravity of decisions. And it was indeed, I guess, inspired by lawyer assistance programs where it would be lawyers helping lawyers. But what was thought about at that point in time was really the necessity for judges to really have their own program so they could be feeling safe and secure in the confidentiality of, again, judges helping judges. So it was started then with this joint group, and they developed a training program so that judges would have a skill set that were peer counselors who could then do very active listening for judges that would call in. Judicial Assistance Services Program has absolutely nothing to do with the Judicial Conduct Committee. There is no sharing of information whatsoever. It is absolutely a confidential service, and peer counselors must sign off on an oath of confidentiality, and then we're given specific instructions on how it is that we do our jobs. It's offered at no cost at all, and the process often always begins with a referral. Sometimes it's a self-referral, but we also welcome staff or others who have become concerned about a judge's demeanor, a change, something that may have triggered a somebody that has been working with them who would note this sort of thing, a colleague who would note this sort of thing, and a call comes in. It is fielded by our mental health professional, and we've had a couple who have made their way through and then retired, and then we've had replacements. Our current mental health professional is Dr. Kantha Raz, and she would receive a direct phone call from the individual that has concerns about the judge.
Okay, such an important program, right? And one of those big reasons it's so important is the unique challenges judicial officers face in regard to, their mental health and well-being in general. Could you tell us a little bit about what these unique challenges are that are related to the position?
Yes, when you think about anybody coming into the court system, particularly in the criminal realm, I can say that on a very generalized basis, and maybe not so much in the civil realm, but often the courts are there to solve some enormous problems, whatever they may be. Family law problems, they may be mental health issues involving the participants. There might be, housing issues, eviction issues, and the very reasonable expectation is that you have a judicial officer who has the skill set that isn't only just the legal skill set, but the listening skill set and the emotional skill set to absorb this, digest it, with the assistance of the attorneys, information, come up with a decision, and then meet that decision out. But these are often life-altering decisions that judges are involved in. Again, when you come into the court system, usually it's the last resort, right? For like I can just say in a civil matter, it might be the last resort. And it might be after there had been a great deal of workup by the participants before they finally landed into the system. On the criminal side of things, it's not by choice, but they come there nonetheless. And the expectation is there too. You have a judge that has the ability to ferret out what's going on. And then sometimes, particularly in superior court, of course, there are substantial sentences that are meted out. The individuals that come into court on the criminal realm have a variety of chaos happening in their lives many times, and some of it having to do with substance use and some of it having to do with mental health, and maybe a combination of the two. And the judge sits in that position making decisions about their lives. And so it is very real to have what is known as secondary trauma for all of the professionals that are involved working with the participants that come into the court system. And for judges in particular, the expectation is that judges just handle it. Right? There isn't always that room given, that perhaps that grace given, that maybe it's really hard to make those decisions. And it's not something that judges are normally comfortable talking about in just a public setting, because the expectations are very high that that's your job and you handle it. And so this was a realization that more needed to happen. The expectation of very good judges needing to have someone to talk to. Yeah. And sometimes it's not always so comfortable to talk to a colleague in the same court for various reasons, various emotional reasons that are involved in it. So developing these trained peer counselors allows for an outreach from the clinical consultant, the mental health professional, to evaluate what the situation is when a call comes in. And then generally speaking, the peer counselor is not from the same area as the judge is presiding in. And again, that's just for the comfort, so that there's a great deal of neutrality with it. I can certainly describe that process, how it happens, but it's so important so that there is that outlet. Our time is not always ours. And so to say, well, why don't you just go for a run or go for a walk or, blow off steam that way? It isn't always enough. And sometimes, like I say, the gravity of these decisions can weigh so heavily but even with that, a little bit more is necessary.
Yeah, of course. And I think it's so important that the Judicial Assistance Services Program is there to, there is something more needed a lot of times than just going on a walk or run or even just, venting to a family member, having that professional peer who, really understands your struggles. I should have mentioned this earlier, but just for those who are interested, we will provide links to more information of the program on the YouTube description and on the podcast webpage, which includes contact information for any interested judicial officers, either for themselves or for a colleague they'd like to refer. So we talked about the unique challenges that judicial officers face. But going back to the program, are there any anecdotes you can share of judges who have really benefited from the program, who've, it's really helped them and have progressed in their well-being?
I always hesitate to be very specific about things.
Of course.
I know that we, because again, protecting that confidentiality with them. But I would say that I know there has been a great deal of satisfaction that has happened because, well, we don't have repeat callers, for one thing. That's usually not the case, and that's not necessarily the litmus test as to something's success. Call as many times as is necessary is always the goal with that.
Absolutely.
But it really is on a case by case, one-on-one basis. And I know that Dr. Kantha Raz now and our prior consultant too reports back out again the successes. And it isn't necessarily an out of the ballpark kind of success, but it's just making those connections, linking someone else up to services. And another added feature with JASP is that depending on the situation, it may be that Dr. Kantha Raz actually provides, we have the ability, there are budgets that is created, but she has the ability to take somebody on herself in a therapeutic sessions, and I believe we offer up 2 or 3 of those, and that's at no cost to the participant. If there is a need for there to be, or the suggested need for further counseling, then Dr. Kantha Raz would make that referral and of course hope that it falls within the participant's insurance to take on the rest of it. So we can work it pretty far and then refer out from there if necessary. And yes, I would say that our satisfaction rate is very high. And it, can vary from just, new judge on the bench having a transition to that position or a transition with those colleagues, all the way through to substance use disorders and medical issues and retirement issues. Contemplating that or forced medical retirements, things of that nature. I mean, there's just a whole gambit of things that can happen. And so far, knock on wood, we've done a good job lifting up our colleagues.
Well, that's fantastic to hear. And I think it's so important that, it does provide those professional peer counseling if needed from the doctor and gives those referrals to, further professional support. Going a little bit away from just the program in general, are there any tips you can share with judicial officers to help improve mental health and deal with the stresses of the position?
So when I took over as co-chair, which I did, I think it's been 2 years, I came into it with the idea being we needed to do more. And JASP had stood up on the premise of being a responsive group, meaning a call comes in and then we respond. But a number of issues had been coming up, and I don't know if it's an increase in the electorate process or what, but a lot of transitions on benches were happening. And there was it is tricky to transition to the bench. I mean, I can share this from my own personal experience, where you work with a very close-knit group of lawyers, and there's that whole, being able to brainstorm and all of that, and then boop, you're out on your own. And it is, it's sharp, it's harsh, and lonely, and all of those sorts of things. And so the whole idea of just waiting for something, I'm going to say bad or traumatizing to happen didn't seem like the only thing to do. I didn't want there to be any uncomfortability with that also being a component, that we will receive that information. We have 20 peer counselors that go through training, and they have to go through training at least once every 2 years with different topics, with the baseline being learning about that responsive, reactive questioning and listening, sort of like a little bit like motivational interviewing at the very preliminary stages. When I came on board, I thought we should be more proactive. And what my inspiration for that proactivity really came from some work I did with a fellow municipal court judge, Judge Anthony Geip, where we were combining judicial wellness with art. He is an amazing artist. I am not, but I do fuss around with things artistically. I'm a potter, I do embroidery, some painting, but nothing like what Judge Geip does. But so he and I did this wellness program, and at the end of it, and his involves all sorts of neuroscience that I learned about as well in this process, that as little as 10 minutes a day of just drawing stick figures, does not have to be beautiful art, does not have to be Van Gogh or any of them. It can just be stick figures, creates new neural pathways in your brain that allows you to handle stress better. So inspired by that, I thought, well, what if we did a take 10 session at lunchtime, so that, still respecting that everybody needs to take a break and decompress and not just spend all of our time filling, every hour with meetings, and have it be fellow judges that would want to perform or provide whatever their specialty is. We started with Judge Finkel, who is also known as Mike the Cardigan Finkel, and he's a comedian, so he put on 10 minutes of comedy. We had Judge Smith, who is an avid reader, reads 50 books a year, I guess, and so he picked out a couple special ones that he went through a book review. We had Judge Shea Brown from the Superior Court. Her new passion is playing pickleball, and so she did 10-15 minutes on that. Judge Rodriguez True, about what your why is. And so that's one thing, is that we have these take 10 sessions where somebody can just come on and watch and listen and maybe learn something new, or enjoy the passion of another judge.
That's awesome.
So that's one of a very, again, out there into the judicial community, hoping to give just a little reprieve, a little moment of time, 10 minutes of time. Sometimes they go a little longer, for a judge to enjoy, and the camaraderie of others. So it's on Zoom, you eat, keep your camera on or off or whatever. But we also, JASP has also put together a program. This was Dr. Kantha Raz, now retired judge, doctor, and a mental health professional. They put together something called From Anger to Authenticity. The mental health professional had actually presented as a trainer for one of our JASP training sessions. And we got the idea that maybe something more elaborate would be welcomed. And you can go in and out of this learning modules. It is on inside courts. Nobody's monitoring it. We're not getting, somebody said, oh, well, we should get judicial legal education units. And I said, no, if somebody wants to access this, they should just be able to go in, no pressure, take bits and pieces from it. And it really is leading someone through what anger actually means, which oftentimes is cover for fear and a number of things. So that's another an access point that judges can go to without ever leaving their desk.
Yeah. So
Shea Brown actually also put together a program about judicial wellness, where that you go through some questioning, and she gives some suggestions about, well, if you're doing this, then maybe try this. Just again, a kind of a light touch, but just having the opportunity to weigh in with another judge's perspective that, has also been struggling with those things. So we have a number of those that are all on inside courts and available to judges to access, so that there is a little bit of lightness. One of the things that I know that has happened as a result of our being a little bit more proactive is that we have had an increase of self-referrals, which I think is brilliant, because that means somebody, as a judge, is actually self-reflecting, is like, maybe I need to talk to somebody in this very hectic pace and very, as I say, demanding job, to have that ability to just be able to talk to someone. So our self-referrals have indeed increased, which we're pleased about. And I am proud that we've been able to continue our more proactive approach than just waiting for a problem to arise.
Yeah, I think that's so important for mental health in general is, yeah, being proactive, taking care of yourself maybe before you need that emergency assistance. So I love to hear that. And I also love the absolute range of activities JASP is offering. And I encourage anyone out there listening, if you know a judicial officer who's struggling or you're struggling yourself, to reach out to JASP. You know, the program can be a huge help. Well, Judge Logan, I'd like to thank you so much for coming on the show today and talking about JASP and, helping talk about and spread knowledge of judicial well-being. Is there anything else you'd like to leave us off on or anyone you'd like to shout out?
No, I think I've hit it.
Okay, I think you did too. Well, again, thank you so much and happy International Day of Judicial Well-Being. You're doing
Yes,
some
I'm
great
very
work.
pleased that this has been acknowledged. I didn't know that, but we're going to start celebrating it.
Yeah, there we go. Well, moving forward, we got the day. All
That's,
right. Well,
thank
once
you so
again,
much.
that's been our show for today, and have a great rest of your day.
Thank you. You too.